Win any situation. Story of Sarah's English learning journey. Sarah had always wanted to speak English fluently. Growing up in a small town, English was not commonly spoken, and the resources available to her were limited. However, Sarah was determined to master the language and prove to herself that she could win any situation, no matter how difficult it seemed. It all started when Sarah received a scholarship to study abroad in the United States. She was both excited and nervous. The thought of living in a foreign country, where everyone spoke English, filled her with both anticipation and fear. She had studied English in school, but she knew that real-life conversations would be much more challenging. Despite these concerns, she believed in herself and made a promise to tackle every situation with confidence. The first challenge, the language barrier. Upon arriving in the United States, Sarah quickly realized that the language barrier was her first big challenge. While she could understand English to some extent, speaking fluently was a different story. Her accent was noticeable, and sometimes people had trouble understanding her. Sarah felt embarrassed and frustrated, but instead of retreating, she decided to face the challenge head-on. She joined a local language exchange group where people from different countries would meet and practice speaking English. At first, she hesitated to speak because of her accent, but the supportive atmosphere helped her gain confidence. Sarah learned that making mistakes was part of the learning process. Her new friends would gently correct her when necessary, but they always praised her for trying. Slowly, her pronunciation improved, and she started feeling more comfortable speaking. The second challenge, fear of public speaking. One of Sarah's biggest fears was speaking in front of a group. In her home country, she had never been asked to give presentations or speeches in English, and the thought of standing in front of her classmates terrified her. During her first few weeks in the U.S., she avoided any situation where she might have to speak in front of others. However, Sarah soon realized that avoiding situations would only delay her progress. One day, her professor announced that every student would have to give a 5-minute presentation on a topic of their choice. Sarah's heart raced as soon as she heard this news. She immediately started to feel the familiar knots of anxiety in her stomach. But then, she remembered her promise to herself to win any situation. Instead of avoiding the task, she decided to prepare. She chose a simple topic, the importance of learning English, something she felt passionate about. Sarah wrote down key points, practiced in front of her mirror, and recorded herself speaking to listen for areas where she could improve. On the day of the presentation, Sarah felt nervous, but she stood tall and walked confidently to the front of the class. She spoke slowly and clearly, focusing on the message she wanted to convey rather than worrying about making mistakes. Her hands were shaking, but she pushed through. After her presentation, the professor praised her for the effort she put into preparing, and her classmates clapped. This moment was a huge victory for Sarah, as it marked her first successful public speaking experience in English. The third challenge, understanding native speakers. Even though Sarah had improved her speaking skills, understanding native English speakers was still a challenge. In her hometown, English was mostly taught through textbooks, and she had never been exposed to real, fast-paced conversations. In the U.S., people spoke quickly, and sometimes they used slang or idioms that Sarah didn't understand. One day, while waiting in line at a coffee shop, Sarah overheard a conversation between two students. They were talking about a movie she had recently watched, but they were using words she had never heard before. Words like cringe, lit, and ghosting were unfamiliar, and Sarah felt lost. She didn't want to seem ignorant, so she decided to look up the meanings of these words later. The next time she heard the same words in a conversation, she was ready. She confidently joined in and asked her new friends about the meanings of certain phrases. To her surprise, they were happy to explain. It turned out that they admired her willingness to learn, and soon, Sarah began to understand and use these slang words in her own conversations. Sarah realized that understanding native speakers required more than just learning grammar and vocabulary. It was about exposure and practice. She started listening to podcasts, watching movies without subtitles, and participating in group discussions. Over time, she became more attuned to the natural flow of conversations and picked up on expressions that she had once found confusing. The fourth challenge, writing in English. Writing in English was another challenge for Sarah. She had always been good at writing in her native language, but writing essays, emails, and reports in English was a different story. Her first essay for an English class was full of mistakes, and she felt discouraged. However, she knew that writing was an essential skill she needed to master, especially if she wanted to succeed in her studies. To improve her writing, Sarah began to read more books and articles in English. She made a habit of noting down new phrases and sentence structures that she liked. She also practiced writing short stories, diary entries, and summaries of articles she read. With time, her writing became more fluid and accurate. She sought feedback from her professors and peers, and they gave her constructive advice on how to improve. One day, Sarah received an email from her professor thanking her for submitting an exceptional report. This moment was another victory for her. She had come a long way from the hesitant student who once struggled with writing in English. The final challenge, building confidence at risk. The last challenge for Sarah was building long-term confidence in her English skills. There were still days when she felt frustrated and doubted her abilities. She would compare herself to others and sometimes feel that she would never reach the level of fluency she desired. But instead of giving in to these doubts, Sarah reminded herself of how far she had come. She continued to push herself, setting new goals and celebrating small victories along the way. She joined clubs, volunteered to lead discussions, and even began helping other students who were learning English. With each new challenge, Sarah's confidence grew. By the time Sarah finished her study abroad program, she had transformed from a nervous, self-conscious student into a confident English speaker. She had learned that language is not just about speaking perfectly. It's about communicating, connecting with others, and continuing to learn. Sarah's journey was not easy, but she had proven to herself that with dedication, practice, and a positive mindset, she could win any situation in her English learning journey. Lessons from Sarah's journey. 1. Face your fears. Whether it's speaking in public or understanding native speakers, confronting your fears head-on is the key to growth. 2. Practice makes perfect. The more you practice, the more confident you will become. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. 3. Learn from every situation. Every challenge is an opportunity to learn something new. Embrace them.